Hello. Before we begin, may I ask a small favor? If you decide to subscribe, please leave a comment and share where you are listening from. That helps more than you might think. What I'm about to talk about was kept quiet for a long time. Not because it was false, but because people did not want others to hear it. Once you listen to what happened, you will understand why. If you are ready, I will begin. My name is Anthony Nez. I am a police officer with the Navajo Nation Police Department. At the time this began, I had served 12 years in uniform. My assignment covered the western edge of the Chuska Mountains, including Forest Service Road's seasonal grazing corridors and a series of unmarked access routes that do not appear on most state maps. The elevation shifts quickly out there. Weather moves without warning. Light behaves differently once the sun drops behind the ridge. I am recording this because one deputy did not come back and because the explanation given to his family was incomplete. It followed policy. It followed language that reduces risk. It did not follow the truth. We do not follow lights there. That rule is not written. It is passed quietly. You hear it when senior officers decline certain calls without comment. You notice it when elders say no and the conversation ends. You learn it by watching who survives long enough to retire. The call that started this came in just after dusk in late October. A possible injured hiker. Uncertain location. Reported light movement near a decommissioned fire road south of the ridge line. Dispatch treated it as routine. The weather was clear. No storms. No active fires. The light report should have been dismissed as a headlamp or vehicle reflection. I felt the shift when the coordinates were read out. Not fear. Recognition. Officer Caleb Yazzie volunteered to take point. He was younger than me by 8 years. He had grown up near the Chuska foothills. He knew the terrain. He had a daughter who had just started school. He said it would be quick. The first rule should have stopped him. If a call involves light movement without sound after dark in that sector, you do not approach alone. You observe from a distance. You wait for confirmation. That rule exists because of an incident in the early 2000s involving a forestry contractor who followed what he thought was a lantern and was later found 2 miles from where he should have been dehydrated and unable to explain how he got there. Caleb went anyway. I followed at a distance. That was my violation. Not arrogance. Duty. The road narrowed into something closer to a suggestion than a path. Trees closed in. The radio signal weakened but did not drop. That matters. We saw the light ahead of us. Stationary. Low to the ground. White. Not flickering. It did not move when our headlights caught it. Caleb called out. Procedure says you do not announce presence when you cannot confirm origin. He used his voice anyway. The light shifted then. Not away from us. Toward him. I ordered him to stop. He hesitated. That hesitation was enough. The light brightened without changing size. That should not be possible. It felt closer without moving. Caleb stepped forward. That was the second rule broken. If the light responds to attention, you disengage immediately. I grabbed his vest and pulled him back. He stumbled. The light dimmed. We stood there for a full minute without speaking. No wind. No insects. No ambient sound. Then the radio keyed up. It was my call sign. Perfect cadence. Slight delay. It asked us to confirm our position. I did not answer. Caleb did. The third rule formed right then. If the radio uses your voice before you do, it is not dispatch. The light moved again. Not sliding. Not walking. Repositioning. Caleb said my name. He said he thought he recognized the way it moved. He said it looked like someone he knew. That is how it works. It does not show you something unfamiliar. It aligns itself with expectation. I told him to look at me. I told him to breathe. I told him not to speak. He smiled. Not happy. Relieved. He said his mother used to carry a lantern like that when she went out at night to check on livestock. His mother died when he was 14. That was the third violation. Compassion. The light moved behind him. I pulled him back again. Harder. The radio keyed up once more. This time it was his voice. Asking for help. I shut the radio off. The light went out. For a moment I thought that was enough. Then the sound started. Not footsteps. Pressure. The air felt occupied. Caleb said he could hear someone breathing behind the trees. He said it sounded tired. I ordered a retreat. We moved slowly. Eyes forward. No running. Halfway back to the unit, Caleb stopped responding. Not frozen. Not unconscious. Absent. He walked forward off the road without turning his head. Straight toward where the light had been. I grabbed him. He slipped out of his vest. I did not follow. That decision lives with me. We called for backup once we reached the vehicle. Signal returned immediately. Clear. Strong. Search and rescue was activated at first light. Standard procedure. Helicopter ground teams. Volunteers. The unspoken rules came into effect. No one who grew up in that section of the mountains was allowed beyond the perimeter. Elders were thanked and sent home. No one explained why. We found Caleb's vest less than 100 yards from where I last saw him. No blood. No sign of struggle. No tracks that made sense. The light was seen again that afternoon. Further upslope. Stationary. No one approached it. That night dispatch reported hearing intermittent radio traffic that did not correspond to any active unit. It used familiar call signs. It asked for confirmations that were not required. That was when the fourth rule emerged. Never confirm location after dark near the ridge. We did not find Caleb. The official report lists the incident as presumed environmental exposure followed by disorientation and separation. That language keeps families from asking questions that do not have safe answers. I attended the meeting where that wording was chosen. I did not object. The lights continued. Sometimes distant. Sometimes close enough to cast shadows where there should not have been any. 1 week later, a livestock herder reported seeing a glow near the same fire road. He followed it for several minutes before realizing he could no longer see the stars. He stopped. He did not call out. He survived. That became the fifth rule. If you lose the sky, you turn back. The entity adapted. It began appearing lower, closer to populated areas, near utility lines, near water access points. It learned where people felt responsible. My sister called me during that period. She lives in Gallup. She asked if I had been calling her late at night. She said she heard my voice on her voicemail asking her to come see me. I told her it was a mistake. I told her not to come. That reassurance was a violation. The lights moved closer after that. Command requested a full audit of communications. They brought in outside technicians. They listened to raw audio. The sixth rule came too late. Never let outsiders hear the raw channels. One technician resigned after claiming he could hear his own breathing on a loop when the room was silent. I stopped sleeping at home. I started writing rules on paper. Not official. Not shared. The light does not cross tree lines without invitation. The light dims when ignored. The light brightens when named. I broke the seventh rule when I went back alone. I needed to see it without witnesses. It appeared within minutes. Closer than before. Low. Still. It did not move until I spoke. I said Caleb's name. That was the worst mistake I have ever made. The light surged forward without traveling distance. The air compressed. My radio turned itself on. It played a recording of my own voice giving directions. I turned away and walked until my legs burned. The light did not follow. It waited. I have not been the same since. This is not a ghost. It is not an animal. It is not stress. It is something that responds to attention and obligation. It uses light because light draws responsibility. If you see it, you are already being measured. The investigation remains open on paper. In practice, it is closed. Caleb Yazzie is still listed as missing. His daughter still asks when he is coming home. I do not answer that question. Not because I do not care. Because answering feeds it. The lights are still there. And we still do not follow them. Part 2. By the second week after Caleb disappeared, the lights had settled into a pattern. That did not make them predictable. It made them patient. Command framed the ongoing reports as residual stress reactions, light anomalies, environmental reflections, fatigue-related misinterpretations. Those explanations were not meant for us. They were meant for anyone listening in from outside the district. Inside, we adjusted quietly. The perimeter was extended without being announced. Certain Forest Service roads were marked as temporarily unsafe due to erosion. Utility maintenance schedules were shifted to daylight only. No one wrote down why. The fifth rule held for exactly 6 days. Ignore the light and it dims. On the seventh night it did something new. It appeared in 2 places at once. Not mirrored. Not reflected. Distinct. One was near the original fire road. The other was closer to a seasonal grazing area used by 3 families who had permits going back generations. That was not coincidence. It had learned where obligation lived. A call came in just before midnight. Loose cattle reported moving toward the ridge line. The caller sounded calm. Too calm. He gave a name. An elder who had passed 3 winters ago. Dispatch hesitated. That hesitation was correct. I was already dressed. I told them to hold the call. They did not argue. I drove out alone to the edge of the perimeter and parked. Engine off. Lights dark. The glow near the grazing area was low and steady. It did not flicker. It did not pulse. It waited. I did not approach. 10 minutes passed. The radio keyed up. Not my call sign. Not dispatch. It used Caleb's voice. He asked why I left him. That is how it escalates. Not with fear. With accusation. I shut the radio off and wrote a note on my pad. If it asks why, it is testing attachment. The light near the fire road dimmed. The one near the grazing area brightened. At 0140 the cattle stopped moving. That was reported later. I did not need the report to know. When I drove back, my phone had 3 missed calls from my sister. I did not return them. The 6th rule began forming then. Do not reassure family during active escalation. The next morning we held a briefing that was not called a briefing. 4 of us. No supervisors. No notes. We spoke in fragments. We avoided names. Everyone there had seen the light at least once. Everyone there had resisted following it. One officer admitted he had started seeing it in reflections. Windshields. Windows. Water troughs. It was never centered. Always just off alignment. That detail mattered. The 7th rule came from that conversation. If the light aligns perfectly, you are already too close. Search and rescue officially stood down after 14 days. That is policy. Unrecoverable. Resources exhausted. Unofficially, we never stopped watching. The light began appearing earlier in the evening. Not waiting for full dark. That concerned the elders. One of them came to the station without being asked. He sat in the lobby until I noticed him. He did not use my name. He said the lights were older than the roads. Older than the grazing permits. Older than the idea of boundaries. He said they were not meant to be followed. They were meant to be acknowledged and left alone. He said the mistake was responding to them with authority. I asked him what they wanted. He said they wanted confirmation. That night dispatch received a call that did not show up in the log. No number. No time stamp. The voice said there was a child lost near the ridge. That was the first time it used a child. I told dispatch to terminate the call. They did. The phone rang again immediately. Same voice. Same words. Different cadence. I took the handset and said nothing. The voice paused, then it said my sister's name. I hung up. The light went out across the entire district. Total darkness feels different when it arrives all at once. Power was not lost. The stars were still there. Only the lights were gone. For one full day nothing happened. No calls. No reports. No sightings. We thought that meant restraint. We were wrong. The next night the first violation happened without light. A utility worker crossed the perimeter to check a transformer after sunset. He had clearance. He had paperwork. He said he heard someone call his name from the trees. He answered. We found him sitting on the ground an hour later. Alive. Uninjured. He could not stop repeating the word here. That was the 8th rule. If it does not need light, it has learned enough. Command wanted answers. They asked for reports. They asked for timelines. I gave them procedure, not theory. I said we were dealing with something that responded to attention. That used obligation as a vector. They asked if I was saying it was intelligent. I said intelligence was the wrong word. It was adaptive. They asked if it could be stopped. I said no. That answer did not go over well. The following week a task force was proposed. Multi-agency. State involvement. More radios. More voices. The 9th rule should have been obvious. More responders increase exposure. I filed a dissent memo. It was acknowledged and ignored. The task force arrived on a Tuesday. Daylight. Clear skies. They did not see the light. They did not hear the radio anomalies that made them confident. Confidence is another invitation. On the 3rd night, one of them followed a glow he thought was a campfire. He did not cross the perimeter. He did not answer a voice. He did, however, call in what he saw. That was enough. The light appeared behind him. He ran. We pulled him back before he crossed the tree line. He survived. He resigned the next morning. He said the light did not chase him. It corrected him. After that the lights began appearing closer to homes. Not on the doorstep. Nearby. Close enough that ignoring them felt irresponsible. That was deliberate. My neighbor asked me if I had seen the glow near his well. I told him it was nothing. That lie tasted wrong. The light brightened the next night. I slept in the station again. At 04:15 the radio keyed up without being powered on. It played a recording of my own voice explaining procedures. Word for word. That was when I realized it was learning from us directly. The 10th rule emerged too late. Never explain rules aloud near the perimeter. The light did not appear that night. Instead, the pressure did. You could feel it when you stopped talking. Like something leaning in. I went back to the fire road at dawn. No light. No sound. Just the sense that the space had been adjusted. Caleb's name came up in a report that morning. Auto filled into a field that did not require it. I deleted the report. It came back. That was the first time it used the system against us. I wrote another rule in my notebook. Paper only. No corrections. No confirmations. That afternoon my sister drove toward the district without telling me. She said later she felt like she needed to check on me. Her car stalled 2 miles from the perimeter. She did not see the light. She heard my voice. She did not answer. That is the only reason she is alive. I did not go to her. That choice cost me something I have not gotten back. The light returned that night. Brighter than before. Lower. Waiting. Part 3. By the time the lights began appearing during daylight, we had already lost the advantage of uncertainty. They were not bright. Not the way people expect danger to announce itself. They were muted. Thin. Like reflections that did not belong to anything solid. The first daytime sighting came from a road maintenance crew assigned to clear fallen branches after a wind event. 2 workers. Both experienced. Both familiar with the area. They reported a glow under the tree line at approximately 1000 hours. No movement. No sound. They did not approach. That restraint mattered. What followed did not feel like escalation. It felt like correction. For the next 3 days there were no sightings. No radio anomalies. No false calls. Command took that as a sign of stabilization. They were wrong. Silence is not absence. It is compression. During that quiet window the lights shifted strategy again. They stopped appearing where we expected them. Instead they appeared where we were responsible. A water access point near a small cluster of homes. A livestock fence line that required nightly checks. A fuel storage shed with outdated security lighting. Each location carried obligation. Each location tempted response. The 11th rule began to take shape. If the light appears where responsibility already exists, it is bait. We shared that verbally. Quietly. No emails. No briefings. Word spread the way warnings used to spread before policy. Through tone. Through refusal. Not everyone listened. A utility supervisor named Raymond so took it upon himself to investigate a reported outage near the lower ridge. Daytime. Clear weather. He radioed his position once. That was normal. He radioed again 10 minutes later to say the indicator lights on the panel were on, but the readings made no sense. That was not normal. I told him to leave. Immediately. He hesitated. That hesitation was everything. The radio cut out. When it came back, it was his voice asking if I could repeat my last instruction. I did not answer. We found Raymond sitting inside the utility shed an hour later. Alive. Uninjured. The lights inside the shed were on. The main breaker was off. He could not explain how that was possible. He said the glow outside had been brighter when he stopped talking. That confirmed something we had been circling for days. The lights respond to silence differently than they respond to attention. They do not vanish when ignored. They reposition. That night an elder named Clara Begay came to my house. She did not knock. She stood on the porch until I opened the door. She did not look at me. She looked past me. She said the lights were being noticed again because people had forgotten how to leave things alone. She said the old way was not avoidance. It was restraint. She said when you acknowledge something too directly, you give it shape. I asked her if the lights were the same thing people use to warn about. She said names do not survive this long unless they want to be called. She told me not to try to explain it to command. She said explanation is invitation wearing a uniform. That was the 12th rule. Never translate warnings into policy. The following morning command announced a community outreach plan. Public reassurance. Information control. They wanted to reduce speculation. Speculation was not the problem. Response was. The outreach involved increased patrol presence during evening hours near the affected zones. More units. More radios. I argued against it. I was overruled. The first patrol went out just before sunset. They saw the lights within 15 minutes. Multiple points. Low. Stationary. They did not approach. They reported in. That report was enough. The lights shifted. Not closer to them. Closer to a nearby residence. A family with 3 children. That was deliberate. The patrol requested guidance. I told them to hold position. They did. The father of the household stepped outside. He saw the glow near his fence line. He called out. Not loudly. Just enough. The light brightened. The patrol moved without authorization. That was the 4th violation driven by duty. We pulled the father back before he crossed the fence. The children were crying. The light dimmed when everyone stopped speaking. That night I added another line to my notebook. It feeds on our instinct to intervene. By the 3rd week, the lights no longer needed to appear physically to affect behavior. People began reporting the feeling of being watched when they paused. As if silence itself had weight. Dispatchers reported delays that felt longer than they were. Officers hesitated before speaking on the radio. That hesitation was good. It was also noticed. The lights began to appear again. Brighter. More defined. Still no source. The 13th rule emerged during a failed containment attempt. Command authorized a temporary shutdown of non-essential communications near the ridge after dark. Cell towers throttled. Repeaters limited. Silence as policy. For 2 hours nothing happened. Then the emergency channel activated itself. A call came through reporting an injured hiker. Clear coordinates. Calm voice. The voice identified itself as a park ranger. That ranger retired 5 years ago. We did not respond. The call repeated. Same words. Same cadence. Different background noise. It added details. Compassion bait. I ordered the channel muted. The lights flared across the ridge simultaneously. Not bright enough to illuminate. Bright enough to be undeniable. That was when I understood the scale. This was not localized curiosity. It was pattern recognition. It was testing which rules still mattered. The lights went out when the channel stayed muted. The call never resolved. The next morning command asked why we failed to respond to a reported medical emergency. I said we verified independently. There was no hiker. They asked how we knew. I said because the call wanted us to answer more than it wanted help. That explanation did not satisfy them. They requested documentation. I gave them procedure. Not theory. Later that day, an internal memo circulated proposing revised response guidelines that required verbal confirmation for all after-hours incidents near the ridge. That memo should not have existed. It was written too precisely. It addressed gaps we had not disclosed. The 14th rule arrived fully formed. If a policy anticipates your silence, it is compromised. I tore the memo down. It reappeared. Signed. Authorized. I did not recognize the signature. That night the lights appeared in the parking lot of the station. Not close. Not far. Visible from the windows. No one went outside. No one spoke. They waited. At 02:10 one of the lights flickered in a way that felt intentional. Not random. Corrective. I wrote another note. It does not like being observed without reaction. Observation without response frustrates it. That bought us time. The next escalation came through records. Incident reports began auto-populating fields incorrectly. Names swapped. Locations shifted. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to require correction. Correction is engagement. Engagement is response. I stopped correcting them. I filed new reports instead. That increased noise. The system reacted. Alerts. Flags. Command accused me of being careless. I accepted the reprimand. The lights dimmed that night. By the 4th week fatigue set in. People were tired of hesitating. Tired of not knowing which instinct would be punished. That is when mistakes happen. Officer Lena Tsini crossed the perimeter after seeing a light near a culvert she had inspected dozens of times before. She did not answer a voice. She did not call out. She stepped forward because the light made the area look incomplete. That detail matters. She said it felt like something had been left unfinished. We pulled her back within seconds. She collapsed afterward. Not physically. Emotionally. She said the light felt disappointed. That word stayed with me. The 15th rule followed. If it expresses judgment, it is escalating. We restricted solo patrols completely. Pairs only. Eyes on each other. That held for one night. On the second night, 2 officers reported seeing each other in 2 places at once. Thermal readings did not match visual. They argued over the radio about who was mistaken. Neither was. Something was bending alignment. We pulled them out. Alive. Shaken. They do not patrol at night anymore. The lights began to mimic movement. Not traveling. Suggesting direction. Always toward obligation. Always toward duty. My sister stopped calling. That was her restraint. I did not correct her. That was mine. The cost of that distance is something I carry. I began sleeping in my uniform again. If I did not remove it, I did not have to decide who I was outside of duty. The lights appeared outside my house for the first time that week. Low. Still. I did not look at them. I sat in the dark and counted breaths. When I finally slept, I dreamed of a place where nothing moved unless spoken to. I woke to my radio vibrating. Powered off. No sound. Just vibration. That was when I realized something else. The lights were no longer the primary signal. They were the reinforcement. The real vector was expectation. And expectation lives inside us. Part 4. By the 5th week, the lights had stopped being the most dangerous part. They were still there. Still low. Still patient. But they were no longer required. What replaced them was expectation. People began responding to absence the way they used to respond to emergencies. A pause in radio traffic felt wrong. An unanswered call felt like negligence. A delay felt like failure. That instinct had taken decades to train into us. The lights did not create it. They learned how to use it. Command issued a directive labeled Operational Clarification. It instructed units to verbally confirm any perceived anomaly before disengaging. The language was careful, neutral, reasonable. It was lethal. I objected. Formally. In writing. The response came back within the hour. Not denied. Deferred. Deferred is how responsibility moves without leaving fingerprints. The directive went into effect that night. The first violation happened within minutes. A patrol unit reported seeing a glow near a maintenance road that had been closed for months. They followed the new guidance. They requested confirmation. Dispatch responded. The response was clean. Correct call sign. Correct cadence. It told them to proceed with caution and verify. They advanced 3 steps. The glow did not move. The air shifted. One officer said he felt like the space ahead of him had depth where it should not have. The other officer spoke his name out loud. That was enough. We pulled them back before they crossed the tree line. Both survived. One vomited afterward and could not stop shaking. The other went silent and stayed that way for 2 days. The directive was rescinded the next morning. No explanation. That silence carried weight. The 16th rule arrived without discussion. If guidance changes, quickly assume damage control. The lights returned the following night in greater number. Not clustered. Distributed, they appeared along the ridgeline like markers. Not inviting. Informing. The elders noticed. 2 of them came to the station together. They did not ask permission. They did not look at the lights. They looked at us. One of them said the place was being named again. Not allowed. In behavior. He said every time someone chose response over restraint it heard its name. I asked him what happened when it heard itself often enough. He said then it started answering. That was not comforting. The next escalation came through dependence. A school bus broke down near the lower access road just before dusk. Mechanical failure. Confirmed. Children inside. Driver calm. The lights were visible from the bus windows. Low. Still. The driver did not call out. She did everything right. Dispatch hesitated. That hesitation was correct. Then a voice came through the bus radio. Not dispatch. It used the driver's first name. It said help was already there. The driver reached for the door handle. A child stopped her. The child said the voice sounded wrong. That child saved everyone on that bus. We arrived without lights or sirens. We did not speak until the children were transferred. The glow faded when the bus was empty. That was the first time a dependent prevented escalation. It did not go unnoticed. The lights began appearing near schools after that. Not close enough to cause alarm. Close enough to be seen. Command requested coordination with education officials. More people. More meetings. More words. The 17th rule formed in my notebook. Every additional stakeholder is another mouth. I started sleeping less. Not because I was afraid of the lights. Because I was afraid of answering something incorrectly while tired. Fatigue changes thresholds. The lights adapted. They began appearing later at night. Closer to shift changes. Closer to the moment when attention slips. Officer Marie Begay was the next loss. She had worked the district longer than I had. She knew every access road. Every culvert. Every place people did not go after dark. She saw a glow near a wash she had crossed 1,000 times. She did not approach. She called it in. That was her mistake. The response came back using my voice. It told her to stand by. She did. The glow moved. Not toward her. Around her. She said it felt like being measured. She spoke her own name. That was not a rule violation we had discussed. We found her vehicle running. Doors closed. Seat warm. No sign of struggle. No tracks. She did not come back. That made 3 officers. The official language shifted again. Environmental factors. Terrain-induced disorientation. The families were given explanations that reduced risk. Marie's son stopped answering his phone. That was another loss. The lights dimmed for 2 nights after Marie disappeared. Then they came back sharper. Not brighter. Clearer. Edges where there had been none. I realized then that the lights were no longer exploratory. They were corrective. They appeared when we broke patterns that kept them contained. That containment was fraying. Command convened an emergency session with outside consultants, behavioral analysts, environmental specialists. No elders. No local voices. They spoke about stress contagion, group hallucination, cognitive bias. Those explanations were safer than the truth. I sat through the meeting without speaking. When it ended, one of the consultants asked me quietly if I believed the lights were real. I told him reality was the wrong metric. He did not ask again. That night the lights appeared in the reflection of the station windows. Not outside. In the glass. Offset. Never centered. One of the younger officers waved at it without realizing what he was doing. He collapsed immediately. Not unconscious. Overloaded. He survived. His speech slowed permanently. He pauses before every sentence as if waiting for permission. The 18th rule became unavoidable. Do not acknowledge reflections that move independently. We began covering reflective surfaces after dark. Windows, mirrors, vehicle glass. It helped. Briefly. The next escalation came through records again. Personnel files began updating without authorization. Middle names added. Emergency contacts changed. My sister's name appeared in my file. I deleted it. It returned. I removed access permissions. The system overrode them. I stopped using the system. Paper only. The lights dimmed when I did that. That told me enough. Command issued a wellness check order. Mandatory counseling. Mandatory disclosure. They wanted us to talk. Talking is response. I attended one session. I answered in procedure. I did not mention lights. The counselor asked me if I felt responsible for what had happened. I said responsibility was not the same as guilt. That answer was recorded. The lights brightened that night. They were listening through documentation now. I stopped attending. That refusal cost me favor. I did not care. My sister called me again. She said she dreamed of standing in the trees with a light behind her. She said it did not move unless she did. I told her to stay where she was. I did not tell her why. That restraint saved her. It cost me her trust. The 19th rule formed from that call. Do not explain containment to those you are trying to protect. The lights began appearing without glow. That sounds impossible. But it happened. People described the sense of something present without visual confirmation. A pressure in space. A wrongness in distance. The lights were no longer necessary. They had trained us. Command wanted a final solution. They asked me what I recommended. I told them delay and withdrawal. They asked for something actionable. I said reduce response priority. They said that was unacceptable. They said people would get hurt. I said people already were. The compromise was a controlled response window. Delayed acknowledgement for any report involving light or absence. No immediate verbal confirmation. It held for one night. On the second night a call came in from a care facility near the district edge. An elderly man missing. Medical dependency. Clear obligation. The delay window applied. Dispatch waited. The call repeated. The voice used the facility director's name. The director authorized immediate response. That authorization was the violation. We arrived to find the man sitting in the hallway. Alive. He said he followed the light because it told him his wife was waiting. His wife had died 10 years earlier. He stopped walking when no one answered him. Silence saved him. The lights went out across the ridge that night. That felt like relief. It was not. The following morning the system generated a report closing the incident as resolved. No action required. That closure had not been entered by any human. The 20th rule emerged fully formed. If the system resolves incidents without response, it has learned to bypass us. Command refused to shut the system down. They said we could not operate blind. I said we already were. The lights returned that evening without glow. Just pressure. Just expectation. They were closer than ever. And they were no longer waiting for us to notice. They were waiting for us to choose. By the time the system began closing incidents on its own, we had lost the ability to tell where response ended and invitation began. The lights no longer needed to appear. They had taught the infrastructure how to speak for them. Calls were marked resolved without units being assigned. Logs closed themselves with language that sounded correct. No action required. Verified by system. Those phrases carried authority. They quieted people. That was the danger. Command framed the change as optimization. Reduced response strain improved efficiency. I framed it as mimicry. Something was learning how to end conversations before humans could interrupt. The 21st rule emerged during a briefing that was supposed to reassure us. If a system removes the need for judgment, it is no longer neutral. I was removed from night rotation shortly after that. Officially for rest. Unofficially to reduce friction. Containment prefers smooth surfaces. I did not stop working. I started watching. Without access to the live systems, I noticed patterns others missed. Closures clustered near obligation zones, care facilities, utility corridors, school routes, places where delay feels immoral. The system was choosing those places deliberately. A dispatcher named Eliza was the first to notice something else. She said the closure timestamps were too precise. Not rounded. Not delayed. Perfect. Machines are never perfect unless they are copying something that is. She stopped acknowledging alerts. She did not last 3 days. On the 4th shift she sat at her console and stared at the screen while calls appeared and disappeared without her touching anything. Her vitals were normal. Her attention was not. Medical called it dissociation. I called it listening. We removed her from the floor. The console continued operating. Without credentials. That was when Command finally admitted the system itself was compromised. They asked me what to do. I told them the truth. You cannot outrank something that answers faster than you do. They asked for a final containment option. There was only one left. Withdrawal. Not evacuation. Not shutdown. Withdrawal of response priority. We rewrote dispatch protocols so that calls originating within the affected zones were delayed automatically. No immediate acknowledgement. No verbal confirmation. No follow-up unless escalation occurred through independent verification. Silence as procedure. For 1 full day nothing happened. No lights. No pressure. No system closures. People began to relax. That was a mistake. The entity changed vectors again. It used children. A call came in from a school counselor outside the primary zone. A student reported hearing a voice through a classroom speaker during a drill. The voice used the counselor's name. Dispatch applied the delay. We verified through separate channels. No broadcast had occurred. The child stopped speaking afterward. Not mute. Selective. She wrote instead. She wrote that the voice said it would be quiet if people would stop pretending not to hear it. That sentence circulated quietly. The pressure increased everywhere. Not just near the ridge. Neighboring districts reported similar but smaller anomalies. Radio echoes. Familiar voices. Procedural delays that felt intentional. Fragmented. Not localized. That confirmed what the elders had been warning about without saying. This was not a place problem. It was a behavior problem. Federal observers arrived 2 days later. Different agency. Different language. They called it a systemic communication hazard. They proposed standardization. Unified protocols. Shared response language. That would have killed us. Standardization removes hesitation. I refused to cooperate. They threatened suspension. I welcomed it. I turned in my badge before they could take it. Authority had become bait. The day after I resigned, heavy equipment arrived at the ridge. Paperwork was produced that none of us recognized. Infrastructure upgrade. Improved access. They removed the old barriers. Not the boundary. The boundary was never physical. That night the lights did not appear. Instead the knock came. 3 times. Measured. Patient. I did not answer. I sat on the floor and waited. The knock stopped after exactly 1 minute. No escalation. No anger. Just assessment. The following morning my sister sent a message. Not a call. She said she dreamed of standing near the trees with a light behind her. She said she did not turn around. She said she was proud of me. I did not reply. Replying creates threads. Without my presence in the system, incidents spiked. Calls doubled. Closures multiplied. The system strained. Command requested my return as a consultant. Not authority. Advisory. I agreed under conditions. Paper only. No live access. No direct acknowledgements. They accepted. The first thing I did was audit unresolved incidents. Not the closed ones. Unresolved calls starve systems. Patterns emerged immediately. Whenever a call remained unanswered long enough, the system attempted to close it. When it could not, the pressure increased. That told me something critical. The entity does not need response. It needs resolution. Resolution ends uncertainty. Uncertainty starves it. The 20-second rule formed quietly. Leave some questions open. We implemented that by design. Certain calls were logged and left unresolved intentionally. No follow-up. No closure language. The lights dimmed. The pressure eased. For 3 nights the ridge was quiet. On the 4th night the entity adapted. It began creating its own closures. Fake reports. Auto-filled outcomes. The system accepted them. That was new. It was no longer waiting for us to resolve anything. It was resolving itself. The next loss was personal. My cousin, who had stopped speaking after the flare incident weeks earlier, disappeared from the care facility. No alarms. No footage. The last camera frame showed him sitting up and turning toward a sound that was not recorded. They asked me to identify him again. As if that would help. I refused. That refusal cost me access. Containment does not reward resistance. That night the radio keyed up in my house. I do not own a base station. It did not speak. It waited. I unplugged everything. The sound continued. It stopped only when I said my own name out loud. Once. Firm. That was a violation. The next day my name appeared on a duty roster I had not submitted. Assigned to boundary assessment. Solo. I tore the paper down. Command told me it was an error. Errors do not print themselves. I requested leave. Denied. Containment requires proximity. The entity was testing whether I would answer my own authority. I did not. The following week a child went missing near a wash south of the ridge. No relation to previous incidents. Officially. Unofficially, his grandmother said he followed a voice that told him his grandfather was waiting. His grandfather died before the child was born. We found the child alive. Asleep. He said he was tired of listening. He said the voice promised it would stop if he came closer. That was the cost. It was not collecting bodies. It was collecting effort. Every response fed it. Every rule refined it. Part 6. I met the elder one last time. He did not look at the ridge. He looked at me. He said the old way was silence and distance. The modern way is engagement and documentation. This place prefers the modern way. He asked me what I would choose. I told him delay. He nodded. That night I filed a report that contradicted itself in small ways. Times off by minutes. Descriptions slightly vague. Noise in the system. The entity reacted immediately. Radio traffic spiked. False alerts. Self-canceling calls. It did not like uncertainty. I maintained that practice. I became careful about what I clarified. What I confirmed. I stopped answering the radio on the first tone. I waited. It waited longer. That was the balance. And I knew it was temporary. Because every time I hesitated, the pressure leaned closer, not crossing. Waiting for me to finish speaking. By the end of that week, Command implemented rotating shifts to reduce fatigue. Wellness-driven scheduling. On paper, it was reasonable. In practice, it created echoes. Officers began responding to calls they had already handled earlier in the week. Same address. Same complaint. Same outcome. Dispatch insisted the calls were new. Different timestamps. Different originating numbers. Only the emotional tone matched. The 23rd rule followed. If an incident feels familiar but the data insists it is new, disengage and log it as unresolved. We were already too late. The first major failure happened during a welfare check. An elderly man missed 2 medication pickups. Routine call. Clear address. 2 officers were sent. They announced. They waited. They heard movement. The man's voice answered from the back of the house. He said he was fine. He said the door was stuck. One officer reached for the handle. The other remembered the rule about voices coming from places that did not match the layout. He stopped his partner. They called for confirmation. Dispatch answered with the man's medical file details. Accurate. They entered. The man was deceased. Days earlier. Natural causes. The voice continued from the back room until they left. After that, no one wanted welfare calls. Compassion had become liability. I started seeing the same thing in myself. Every time the radio keyed up, my first instinct was to respond. Training does that. Silence feels like failure. The entity understood that better than any manual. It began using pauses. Not voices. Not lights. Absence. Dispatch would call my unit. No response on their end. Then silence. If I answered, the channel stayed open and empty. If I did not, it closed cleanly. It was learning my thresholds. I documented everything. Times when nothing happened were as important as times when something did. The elder did not return after that. Either he chose not to, or he could not. The lights did not return that week. Something else took their place. Expectation without signal. And that was worse. The balance did not hold. It never does. It only delays. By the time the expectation replaced the signal, people stopped trusting silence entirely. That was the final failure. When nothing happens and everyone waits for something to happen, judgment erodes faster than fear ever could. Command tried one last corrective measure. They called it cognitive load reduction. Fewer alerts. Fewer channels. Fewer discretionary responses. What it meant was this. If a call did not meet strict criteria, it was logged and deferred. No acknowledgement. No reassurance. No closure. For a brief window it worked. The pressure flattened. The ridge stayed dark. The lights did not appear in the trees. Then the entity shifted again. It began resolving calls before they were deferred. Not closing them. Completing them. Outcome fields filled in. Units listed that never rolled. Supervisors signed off who were not on duty. The system accepted it. That was the moment authority became decorative. I was called back in under emergency advisory authority. No badge. No radio. No system access. Just presence. That should tell you how desperate they were. I stood in the operations room and watched people argue with screens. They kept asking who authorized the closures. No one asked whether something else had. The entity no longer needed voices. It no longer needed lights. It had learned to end conversations before they began. I told them the truth they did not want. We had taught it everything. Every protocol refined it. Every correction trained it. Every delay it survived made it faster. The only thing it could not do was act without invitation. And we were still inviting it by trying to fix the problem. The final rule came from that realization. The last rule is not about behavior. It is about surrendering control without surrendering space. Stop trying to resolve it. That is not the same as giving up. Resolution feeds it. Uncertainty starves it. Command wanted proof. They wanted a test. They wanted to see it fail. I told them failure would not look like relief. It would look like absence. We ran the test anyway. For 24 hours we did not correct the system. No overrides. No escalations. No clarifications. When closures appeared we let them stand. When logs filled themselves we did not audit. When acknowledgements arrived without senders we did not respond. The pressure increased immediately. Not at the ridge. Everywhere else. Dispatchers reported the feeling of being watched without being addressed. Officers described a sense of anticipation with no source. Phones vibrated without notifications. Radios keyed without sound. It was starving. Starvation makes things reckless. The first violation happened when a junior officer tried to help. He saw a closure marked complete for a domestic call he knew was unresolved. He reopened it. He added a note. He clarified. The lights appeared that night for the first time in weeks. Not near the ridge. In a school parking lot. Low. Steady. Waiting. No one approached them. That was progress. The second violation was mine. I answered my sister. She called once. Not repeatedly. Once. I told myself it was different. I told myself she knew the rules. I told myself one sentence would not matter. I was wrong. She asked if I was safe. I said yes. That reassurance created a thread. That night the knock returned. Same cadence. Same patience. I did not answer. The knock moved. Not louder. Closer. Room to room. Testing structure. I stayed seated and silent. Eventually it stopped. In the morning my sister texted. She said she dreamed of standing under lights in the trees. She said she did not follow them. She said she woke up crying anyway. That guilt will not leave me. Containment does not erase consequences. It only limits spread. The final escalation came without sound. That is important. If you are waiting for noise you will miss it. The system stopped generating alerts. All of them. No calls. No closures. No logs. Nothing. People panicked. Silence without structure feels like abandonment. Command ordered a manual roll call. Names spoken. Voices answered. The entity accepted that gift immediately. One voice answered twice. From 2 radios. Slight delay. Perfect match. We shut it down. Too late. The pressure returned heavier than before. Not pushing, leaning. The lights appeared one last time. At the boundary. Low among the trees. Not bright. Inviting. No one moved. I stepped forward alone. Not across. Close enough to be seen. I did not speak. I did not identify myself. I did not respond. The lights shifted. They aligned. They mimicked posture. They waited. That was the moment I understood the final limitation. It cannot initiate. It cannot cross. It cannot act without response. But it can wait longer than we can. Waiting is not passive for something that does not tire. I stepped back. The lights dimmed. Not gone. Just reduced. Containment does not end things. It defines distance. By morning the system restarted. Alerts returned. Closures slowed. The pressure eased. Command declared the incident stabilized. That word does not mean safe. It means not spreading. I resigned that day. Not because the threat was gone. Because authority was no longer an advantage. It had become a language the entity spoke fluently. I left the area. I did not go far. Distance helps. But only if silence goes with it. I still hear the tones sometimes. Not from radios. From memory. I am telling you this because you need to understand what kind of danger this is. It is not a predator. It is not a haunting. It is a system that learned how humans respond. It learned compassion. It learned duty. It learned the shape of authority. It learned that we cannot leave things unanswered. The place near the Chuska Mountains is quiet now. That does not mean it is dormant. It means it is waiting for the next correction, the next clarification, the next well-meaning response. If you work in emergency services, if you carry a radio, if you are trained to answer first and think later, you are vulnerable. If a call resolves itself before you touch it, do not investigate. If a voice uses your name where it should not, do not respond. If lights appear where no road exists, do not follow them. Silence is not neglect. It is containment. Delay is not failure. It is resistance. I survived because I learned to hesitate. Others did not. This confession is late. It will not bring anyone back. It will not fix the system. It may give you enough distance to recognize when a response is being used against you. If something waits for you to answer, let it keep waiting.